Throughout his 70-plus years working as a television and film writer and producer, the New Haven, Connecticut-born centenarian has produced, written, developed, or created more than 100 shows, many of which are considered to be among the best TV offerings of all time. The peak of his career was arguably in the 70s, when he created shows like All in the Family, The Jeffersons, Sanford and Son, Good Times, and One Day at a Time. But in the decades that have passed since that groundbreaking era, Lear has continued to actively produce television shows, including the Emmy Award-winning remake of One Day at a Time, which hit Netflix in 2017, and most recently, the 2022 reboot of Good Times. Lear has also devoted much of his life to political activism. Throughout his body of work, you can see how Lear's social and political views have influenced his shows. Join us as we discuss Norman's recent announcement that's been creating quite a buzz. He holds an Emmy record. You might be wondering how Lear managed to get to the top of the Hollywood ladder. Well, it's not the easiest question to answer, but one thing we're sure of is it wasn't because of his family connections. His dad worked as a securities broker and ended up going to jail for selling fake bonds when Norman was just a boy. Lear was born in New Haven, Connecticut in 1922. He served in World War II as a gunner and radio operator before finding his way to New York City in 1945. There, he worked as a publicist for a measly $40 a week. But this wasn't what he really wanted to be doing with his life. So in 1949, he packed his bags and moved to California to look for work as a comedy writer. He wasn't about to live his life slaving away for a meager wage without chasing his dreams. He knew that we all have just one life to live, so he was determined to make it count. In 1950, he was hired on as a writer for the comedy variety program Ford Star Review with Jack Haley. Shortly thereafter, he scored another gig writing for the comedy anthology series The Colgate Comedy Hour. Norman Lear's career has been nothing short of awe-inspiring. After he made it, he never stopped working. It's been his relentless tenacity that has helped establish himself as one of the most influential names in American TV history. In 2019, at 97, he became the oldest person to be nominated for and to win an Emmy Award for the category of Outstanding Variety Special for live in front of a studio audience, Norman Lear's All in the Family and The Jeffersons. Lear then broke his own record at age 98 when he won the same award for live in front of studio audience, All in the Family, and Good Times. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, make sure you give it a like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Tap the bell icon to turn on notifications. And keep watching to find out how Lyn Lear, Norman's wife, has been one of the most inspiring figures in his life. Norman Lear's book and podcast. His talents aren't limited exclusively to the realms of TV and movies. He's also written a memoir titled Even This I Get to Experience, which was published by Penguin Books in 2014. The title of the book comes from a chapter in his life where he fell on some financially troubling times, despite the fact he had experienced substantial success career-wise. At one point, he thought he might even have to sell his home. Having heard he had fallen on hard times, his son-in-law called him up and asked how he was feeling. Lear wrote, "My answer was terrible, of course. But I must be crazy because despite all that's happened, I keep hearing this inner voice saying, even this I get to experience." In 2017, Lear launched his podcast, All of the Above with Norman Lear, which has hosted guests like Amy Poehler, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and Antonio Banderas. He's one selfish cat. Norman Lear has been married 3 times. He married his first wife, Charlotte Rosen, in 1943. They welcomed one child into the world, a daughter named Ellen. Both Ellen and Charlotte were by Norman's side when he made that fateful move from New York to California in 1949 to pursue his dream of writing comedy. Lear married his second wife, Frances Loeb, in 1956, and they ended up having 2 daughters together, Maggie and Kate. After 29 years of marriage, the couple divorced in 1985. Frances Loeb made headlines for her eye-watering $100 million settlement, which, according to the Chicago Tribune, was one of the largest settlements at the time. But even after taking such a huge loss, Lear's net worth today is still estimated to be upwards of $200 million. Lear married his third wife, Lynn Davis, in 1987. They ended up having 3 children together, Brianna, Benjamin, and Madeline. As of 2021, they're still happily married after more than 30 years of matrimony. Lynn has called Lear one of the last of the real romantics. She's also shared that even after all these years, they still start off their mornings with a kiss as soon as they wake up. Lear is equally full of praise for his wife. When recently asked what he thinks about his other half, he gloated, "I love the way she loves me. I'm just one selfish cat." Lyn Lear, a woman of many hats. Like her husband, Lyn is an accomplished filmmaker and activist. She's produced a myriad of poignant documentaries on such topics as climate change, investigative journalism, and modern developments in technology and medicine. Her 2019 film, The Great Hack, which explored social media's role in the 2016 election, was nominated for an Emmy. Lear also sits on the board of directors of numerous organizations that she strongly believes in, such as the LA County Museum of Art, the Norman Lear Center, and the National Academy of Medicine's Healthy Longevity Advisory Council. She has a PhD in clinical psychology and a license in family and marriage therapy. Despite the fact that Lyn and Norman have both enjoyed wildly successful careers complete with hectic schedules, their marriage appears to have been fortified by their family-first philosophy. Norman told Business Insider he thinks he and his wife have done a really good job, but pointed out that having a happy and healthy family life requires constant care and maintenance. Norman's political opinions have made him some enemies. Norman Lear has always been unapologetically opinionated. It's fairly clear he cares deeply about the world he lives in. And even though his work has primarily focused around Hollywood, his political views have earned him his fair share of enemies. In 1980, after watching all of Reverend Jerry Falwell's old-time gospel hour, Lear decided to abruptly stop filming the movie he was working on and quickly produced a 60-second commercial on religious intolerance instead. This chapter led to Lear forming the People for the American Way in 1981 with the help of Congresswoman Barbara Jordan. The purpose of the group was to reduce national division by increasing communication among different and opposing groups throughout society. Lear advocated for secularism and firmly believed that religion had no place in politics. Jerry Falwell responded to Lear's action by declaring him an enemy of the American family. Falwell accused him of being anti-Christian and harboring a vendetta against those who preached the gospel. Lear didn't let such baseless accusations get to him, however. As a practicing Jew, he knew no one that really knew him could ever call him anti-religious. In a scathing reply to Falwell's unsubstantiated claims, he called the televangelist out for what he perceived as blatant anti-Semitism. Norman thinks Archie Bunker likely would have been a Trump voter. All in the Family's Archie Bunker, played by Carroll O'Connor, who was known for being a bigoted yet beloved family man. Speaking to the New York Times shortly after celebrating his 100th birthday, Lear opined that Archie probably would have been on Team Trump if he were around today. He went on to express that the January 6th attack on the Capitol and the House investigation into the former president's alleged role in it might have elicited a strong reaction by a hypothetically Trump-supporting Archie. Lear wrote that the sight of the American flag being used to assault Capitol police officers would have sickened the immensely patriotic Bunker. Norman further expressed his hope that the resolve shown by Representatives Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney to expose the truth would have earned Archie's respect. This wasn't the first time, however, that Lear talked about Archie's relation to Trump. In 2017, he told the Daily Beast that Trump is shrewd in a way that Bunker never was, but Archie was far wiser in heart. In Lear's New York Times piece, he noted that Archie, despite his flaws, deeply loved his country and family, even when he was being called out for his ignorance and bigotry. You may love the Jeffersons or the Evans family and wonder how Norman came up with these fascinating characters. But there's an unsung hero who helped create many of our favorite characters. He wanted American audiences to see black heroes on screen and never got the credit he was due. In fact, he ended up suing Norman Lear over Good Times. Keep watching to find out more. Norman Lear's career. There's no doubt Norman Lear is a genius. He helped create some of the best American sitcoms of all time. He began his career as a comedy writer in the 1950s and flourished through the 60s. By the time the 70s came around, he had the power to create his own shows. Among them were All in the Family, Maude, The Jeffersons, and Good Times, to name a few. These sitcoms were instrumental in giving opportunities to black talent. These shows were the first time American audiences could see the black American experience without the usual slapstick and degrading performances of characters like Stepin Fetchit or Amos and Andy. All in the Family and Maude mostly featured white cast members, but it was on these shows that we first got introduced to George and Louise Jefferson, as well as Florida and James Evans. We then saw these characters on their own shows, The Jeffersons and Good Times. To this day, Norman Lear is remembered for his incredible contributions to these shows. He's also been credited for creating opportunities for black American actors that didn't exist before. But there's more to the story. Before we tell you more about why Norman Lear was sued over Good Times, be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to Factsverse if you haven't already. Eric Monte. In the 1960s, a young man named Kenneth Williams dropped out of his Chicago high school, Cooley Vocational High School. He enlisted in the U.S. Army, but didn't last long. He had an insatiable thirst to tell stories and a rebellious spirit, the entire journey taking him 2 years. On the way there, he carried a dream. He wanted to be a writer despite not having formal training. He grew up watching popular American TV shows, particularly Westerns. He was also an avid reader. While he loved the characters on TV and in novels, he realized there weren't any black heroes for him to look up to. He decided he was going to create such characters. He adopted the pseudonym Eric Monte and was determined to become a film and TV writer. He managed to land a gig writing one script for Lyn Lear's hit sitcom All in the Family. To this day, it's a bit of a mystery which episode he contributed to, as he didn't receive credit for his work. But Eric Monte has claimed he's the creator of George and Louise Jefferson, who first made their debut on All in the Family. These memorable characters were then given their own sitcom, The Jeffersons. Eric Monte also created Florida and James Evans and their children, who then had their own sitcom, Good Times. Apart from his work on Good Times, he also wrote the screenplay for The 9 Lives of Fritz the Cat, as well as an episode of the UK sitcom The Fosters. His best work was the screenplay for the 1975 film Cooley High, based on his own school experiences. This film became the basis of the 1970s sitcom What's Happening? Bad Times with Good Times. While Eric Monte is credited as the creator of Good Times and wrote several of the show's episodes, he still had many challenges working on the show. The show's producer was Lyn Lear, and he held the reins. Eric Monte often had arguments with Lear about the direction of the show. Esther Roll and John Amos, who played Florida and James Evans, would often side with Eric in these battles. The trio didn't like how many of the white writers depicted some of the black characters, particularly Jimmy Walker's character JJ. They felt the characters were stereotypical and presented negative images of black Americans. But Norman wasn't having it. Part of the reason why the character of James Evans was killed off in the show was because John Amos was fired due to his demand to play a dignified character. Eric Monte has unabashedly claimed that Lyn Lear is a racist and felt that many episodes of Good Times didn't portray black Americans the way he wanted to show them. Eric Monte was still seen as a talented writer, but just because someone is appreciated doesn't mean they'll get treated with respect. He never received credit for creating the Jeffersons' characters or for inspiring the TV show. He also didn't get paid residuals for the characters he created on Good Times. While he was credited for writing Cooley High, which inspired What's Happening, he once again didn't receive remunerations. He decided to sue Lyn Lear. He also sued Bud Yorkin, who produced What's Happening, accusing them of stealing his ideas and not compensating him. He won a $1 million lawsuit. While this was a victory, it was a short-lived one. Eric Monte was blacklisted after this lawsuit, and he struggled to find regular work as a writer. Lyn Lear's legacy. The lawsuit was a mere blip in Norman's incredible, successful career. He's now in his late 90s and remembered as one of the most important figures in the American television industry. He's also the subject of a documentary called Lyn Lear, Just Another Version of You. In the documentary, he revealed there was a story he used to tell about his grandfather that was a total lie. He used to tell a story about how his grandfather wrote letters to the American president and received responses back. But he revealed it was actually his friend's grandfather who wrote those letters. Director Heidi Ewing stated Norman likes to spin a yarn. While this particular anecdote may have been in jest, many of us wish he had given Eric Monte the proper credit he deserved. What's Eric Monte up to today? Eric's work after the lawsuit has been sporadic. He contributed to the script for the episode Thy Brother's Keeper for the sitcom Benson. He also wrote the episode Pop Gets Evicted for the Wayans brothers and wrote That's My Mama for the drama series Moesha. He wasn't proud of this latter script and felt it was his worst piece of writing. Since 2001, he hasn't been credited for any TV or film scripts. In fact, his life has not been easy in the past few decades. He had a drug habit and had to go to rehab to fight it. He was living in a homeless shelter in California for several years. But despite these events, Eric Monte remains optimistic and feels he's lived a great life. And he hasn't stopped writing. He wrote a novel called A Prophet Ran Away, published in 2009. It told the story of Nat Turner, who led a rebellion amongst American slaves in the 1800s. In 2016, he self-published a book called Blueprint for Peace. In it, he outlined his plan to prevent wars and reduce crime rates. He also called for the abolishment of taxation in the book. These books are widely available today and have become popular among fans of Mr. Monte's writing. In recent years, he's given more interviews where he reflects on his career and his unfortunate experiences working with Lyn Lear. We can hope Eric Monte will garner more attention in the coming years. We also hope we'll see a new TV show or film based on his writing. And if you love certain American 70s sitcoms, then you've probably got Eric Monte to thank. Now it's time to hear from you. Are you a fan of the hit sitcoms we talked about in this video? Let us know in the comments section below. And before you go, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to Factsverse if you haven't already. Click the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content.